Well, hello everyone. Wild Bill here. Let's see, what can I tell you? With up front here, let's see. Well, I want to tell you an interesting experience I had to start off with. This fall, I trapped a red tail, and I flew it for a couple of months, and then in January, I released it, and because of my schedule, I just didn't feel I could do it justice, so I cut it loose. And then about 5 weeks later, I decided, well, I'm gonna trap another one. So out I go. I trap a red tail, bring it home, and I, get it just and sevened up and on the fist and pulled the hood, and the bird just sat there. It didn't put its wings out. It didn't, have its mouth open. It just sat there on that fist, kind of looking around, just unconcerned about me. And then I brought it into the house, and it saw my dog. And normally, as you folks know, when it sees a dog, it's freshly trapped hawk, they just don't like that at all. Well, it just sat there and looked at that dog like it knew it all its life. Then I sat down with it and, was manning it on the fist and sat there with it for a while. And I'll be damned if the hawk didn't just kind of poke a leg and just sit there. And then when I put it on the perch, it was in the house, of course, it just sat there too. It didn't bait, it just kind of sat there. And I'm thinking, holy crap, what the hell is this about? And then I realized that I had trapped this hawk in the same general area that I had released the other one. So I thought, well, this has got to be the same hawk. So the following evening, I called it to the fist, just to see what it would do. I hadn't fed it off the fist at all. I just wanted to call it, bam, boom, that bird was there on the fist. And then I thought, man, this has got to be that bird. And the bird didn't have any really distinguishable markings, but its tail feathers, I should say, were a little worn at the bottom because it would, it had the, it would go up to a perch. I could watch it through my camera and I could see it would jump up to the perch and then go down to the floor and walk around, jump back up, go down and walk around. And so it kind of wore the bottom edge of the tail feathers. And then it had a missing, one of the tail feathers had about 1.5 inches missing. So I hooded her up and turned her around and looked at that tail, and it was the same tail. So I had the same bird. That is amazing. Totally amazing in my mind, because I don't know of anyone that's happened to. I mean, what are the chances of that? Because there were other red tails out there, trust me. And so it was an interesting. It's been an interesting experience. It really has, and it says something about their memory. They don't tend to forget. That's anyway. I thought I would share that with you. Oh, and I made a video. I took her out. I guess it was the third day I had her, and I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna fly her free." So I took her out and turned her loose, and I made a video of that. And I'll make that available here in the next couple of days or so, and you can see what happened then. But anyway, I wanted to tell you that first. Now, to the main reason I'm making this video. Back in December, the NAFA, that is the North American Falconers Association, published an article I wrote called "The Passion That Is Falconry." And I've received some positive comments about that article, not the least of which Hans Peters wrote me and told me that this should be required reading for all new falconers. So with that thought in mind, I thought I would make it more public for those who are not members of NAFA and haven't had an opportunity to read the article, and in hopes that it will be a benefit. It'll be a benefit perhaps to individuals and also to falconry as a whole. So let me get to it here. It begins by me sharing an experience I had on Facebook, on a Facebook page, one of those falconry Facebook pages, where a gentleman was strongly advocating that that there a certain way of training that passes Cooper's hawks, and that if you didn't, the message was, if you didn't do it this way, you were making a mistake. And I asked why he was and he was adamant about it, and I was asked why he was so wrapped around the axle about how people train their Coopers. As long as they're not hurting the bird, what difference does it make? And his response, amongst other things, was that we're all passionate about falconry, and he was simply responding to his passion. And I thought about that. You have to excuse me from I have to clear my voice occasionally because I got an allergy, and that's what happens. But anyway, I thought about that, and I decided I was going to look into passion, because it's a term we use all the time. Well, not all the time, but I've used it when people that were not falconers asked me about falconry, and I explained it to them, and as a way of explaining it, I would say that it was a passion. And so I decided, as I say, to look into it, and I did. And what I found out right up front is that, and this is the thing I ask you to keep in mind, is that it is a strong emotion. Passion is. Yes, but I felt personally, I feel I should say, that it goes beyond, for falconers, it goes beyond just being a strong emotion. Because you have to have, as I see it anyway, some sort of a catalyst, that sparks that emotion. And not everybody has it, because let's face it, if it were just a passion, then we'd have a bunch of falconers out there, a lot more than we have now. But that's not the case. And you and I have all been in discussions with people who have found falconry to be fascinating. Really intrigued by the sport, but they didn't go on to be falconers, and so you have to ask why, and the answer to that is, I say, I think that you just have to have something, some sort of intrinsic motivation. And for me, and perhaps for some of you folks as well, it's always been, I think it's been a result of my affinity for animals, including, of course, wild animals. And the thought of being able to go out there and hunt with a wild raptor, that was it, man. That was the catalyst. That's what galvanized the passion. So again, remember, strong emotion, and it's coupled with a overarching affinity that is an integral part of who we are. That's a strong combination. It really is. It's a big deal. So I think we ought to keep that in mind. Now, also years ago, I feel compelled to mention this because, well, I think hopefully you'll see. Years ago, I wrote an article, and it was called, I think it was called Falconon Anonymous, or I don't know, Falconon, something Falconon, I forget the name of it now. It was a tongue-in-cheek article about how we are all a bunch of addicts, and that as a result, NAFA should start a Falconon group, like Alcoholic Anonymous, to help us out. And but in that article, I did relay some factual information that I'd like to share with you regarding this addiction business. I've seen behavior, including my own, that certainly could be viewed as addictive. I've seen falconers whose marriages were falling apart continue to focus on falconry instead of trying to save the relationship. I had a friend who chose to work the night shift, even though it was inconvenient, to say the least, for him and his family, so that he could fly his bird during the day. I've also seen falconers take on jobs beneath their abilities for the same reason. And unfortunately, I have seen falconers sacrifice good friends for no other reason than because of their obsession with falconry. So I wanted to point that out to you because, there is an addictive quality to falconry. There certainly is. And Ruth Ings, that's spelled E-N-G-S, writes, any activity, substance, object, or behavior that has become the major focus of a person's life to the exclusion of other activities, or that has begun to harm the individual or others physically, mentally, socially, is considered an addictive behavior. A person can become addicted, dependent, or compulsively obsessed with anything. So, that's something that, we don't want to overlook, but that's not the gist of what I want to talk about here, but I did want to point it out. So, back to passion. Now, for thousands of years, I should say, maybe thousands, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Passion has been written about, and beginning with Plato. And it has always carried kind of a cautionary, has been written within a cautionary context. For example, Plato wrote, or saw passion as devoid of reason and typically outside of one's control. Passion always overruled reason. Therefore, one was to be aware of one's passions. But, and that's the way it's been, as I say, for eons, so to speak. But then recently, say beginning about, well, I don't know when it began, but certainly relatively recently, passion began to, at some point in time, became a psychological construct, and it began to be understood better as a result. And one of the things that was identified was that there were two types of passion. One was harmonious and one was obsessive. Now, the harmonious passion refers to a strong desire to engage in an activity that remains under a person's control. And then, as you might expect, the obsessive passion would be the opposite of that. It would be beyond the person's control. Now, let's see what else here. Now, and then I do. Did I quote Villarend here? Yes, Villarend. From the previous quote, he points out, we all know passionate people who seem to suffer and make other people suffer as well. Indeed, we know from experience that passion can arouse negative emotions, can lead to inflexible and rigid persistence, Indeed, we have all seen people demonstrate this sort of behavior, and in my younger years, I certainly epitomized this statement by Bill Rand, I have to admit. But there's a positive side to passion, because or the harmonious side, I guess, that I mentioned previously, because we all know falconers out there who, some of them of whom have been around a long time and are very knowledgeable about the sport, and who have contributed in a positive way towards falconry. But you don't hear a lot about them, you just don't. And if you do, it's always quite positive. So fortunately for falconry, there are those folks out there that, and the bulk of falconers are, of course, fall within that view, and that's a good thing. But getting back to Villerand, he writes, obsessively passionate people experience some sense of insecurity and uncertainty, and readily experience adverse situations as posing self-threats. With such a fragile and contingent sense of self-esteem, people are likely to engage in self-protective or self-enhancement processes. Here again, I can say that up until relatively recently, that certainly described me. There's no doubt about it. It took me a long time to reach a point where, too long actually, where I was able to admit that my behavior as a falconer, my motivations, or however you want to look at it, have been compromised by psychological inadequacies. Yeah. So, so anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And now some of you might be asking, some of you who know that I, retired in the Marine Corps after 27 years, you might be asking, well, how could someone who has low self-esteem, make a career out of the Marine Corps? And I asked myself that question. And let me tell you, I think, personally, I think the Marine Corps is a wonderful place for people with low self-esteem. Because people with low self-esteem, they want to be recognized, they want to be seen as somebody. Just so, why wouldn't somebody with low self-esteem join a unit or an organization like the Marine Corps? Huh? The few and the proud and all that sort of stuff. Why not? And the Marine Corps gave me and others like me, I'm sure, ample opportunity to enhance my image, or be somebody, to be recognized and that sort of stuff. So I imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I imagine there are a lot of people in the Marine Corps who have low self-esteem. It's a great place for them. It really is. I'm glad I was in there. So, but, and I'm not suggesting that, one of the things I should say that I miss about the Marine Corps, or that, is the camaraderie. I really do. I know we all had egos and our own, whatever. But I knew that if push came to shove, my fellow Marines would be in my corner. I knew that. And that, you know, in other words, there was a common bond that transcended everything. But this is something that we don't find in falconry, unfortunately. We really don't. You know, we always hear about, well, you know, falconers, you know, they're their own bosses. They're, you know, they're real stubborn. They're very independent. They want to do their own thing. We could never get together and that sort of stuff. We always hear that as a way of explaining why we are not closer, why we're not really truly a brotherhood or a sisterhood. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that, you know, falconry is the same as the Marine Corps, because it's not. Entirely different. You know, I'm not suggesting that at all. But the thing that I would ask that we keep in mind is that we are a relatively small group of participants in a sport that is thousands of years old. You know, there is a lot of history behind falconry, and you know, it would seem to me that would be our common bond. You know, that would be the thing that would transcend our hang-ups. You know, and that's a big part of the reason why I'm doing this, is I'm hoping that we take another look at it. You know, I really do. And of course, I'm not the first person to speak out about this. I remember an interview with, I think it was either Frank Beebe or Hal Webster. It was, you know, in their very very late years. I forget who did the interview, but this was one of, whoever the person was, I forget which one now, the same thing, you know, that person was concerned about was falconers not being more of a cohesive group. And so anyway, I just thought I would write this article in hopes that, as I said, it would be a benefit to individuals, and in that vein, ultimately be a benefit to falconry. You know, and those of you that do suffer from low self-esteem, it's probably a hell of a lot easier for you to admit that nowadays than it was for me, believe me, because when I, you know, see, in a couple of months I'll be 75 years old. So when I was your ages, you know, if you had a mental problem, you didn't admit it. You ignored it. And even if it was in your family, man, that was hush hush, because that was you know, looked down upon. It was a weakness. It was not something that you wanted anyone to know about. But nowadays things are so much different, I think. You folks out there, you younger folks, you know, you're much more aware. You're much more giving. You know. So it should be easier for people that have low self-esteem to you know, admit to it to themselves anyway, and then you can change it. You can, you know. There's no, it's not a genetic thing. It's low self-esteem is a direct result, unfortunately, of not having been raised in an environment where you were made to feel important, that you were in fact someone, that you did in fact have potential, etc. That's where it comes from. It's not going to go away, but I can assure you that if you're aware of it, you can certainly control it. And if you can control it, it will make your life a hell of a lot more enjoyable, and the lives of others. And as I say, it will contribute in this case to falconry as a whole. So That's why I'm doing this. And as I've said so many times, I'm going to finish it off here. As I've said so many times now, there is more to life than falconry. Much more. Look for the harmony for your sake, as well as the sake of your family, friends, and potential friends. As the poet Hesiod of ancient Greece said, observe due measure. Moderation is best in all things. So, there you go, gang. I want to wish you all the very best. I truly do. And I hope this will be of some benefit to someone. And hey, by the way, I'm still wanting to fly another Passage Soarhawk. I tried to get one last year and was unable to do it. I'm still looking. If any of you can help me out there, I'd appreciate it. I'd be happy to get out of state permits and all of that. If you have some nests that you think are viable, let me know, and I'm willing to travel within reason, of course, but I'm willing to do that. So if you, as I say, if you can help me, give me a holler, and I'll see you downwind. Take care.